This is a keynote intended to be kind of fun. I gave you guys the option if you want something dry, and you said, nah, you would do something different. So this is sort of on the other end of the spectrum. I have a whole bunch of different presentations. This one's, jumps around a little bit and is a little different. But it's intended to be fun, but also informative. Like, I've been doing cybersecurity for 40 years, and there's some serious messages in here. But you're going to see that it's a little fun, and it's a keynote is supposed to be enjoyable. So I just give you an idea, sort of the maturity level here. Let's start with something that's a little different. About a year ago, I'm walking down the street, like in Hoboken, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, love what you're wearing." And I went, "What?" It was like this young lady. She goes, "Oh, love what you're wearing." Hey, and then this other girl comes over and says, "Oh my gosh, she's like perfect." And I went, "What?" And they said, "Could we take your picture?" And I went, "What?" I thought it was students or something. They looked at me like they were 12 years old. So they said, "Walk with your phone." And I went, "All right." And they're like, "Oh, this is great." And all these people taking pictures. I did it a few times. And then they came over and they said, "Would you sign a release?" And I said, "Is this like a class project or a school thing?" They said, "It's like this thing we're going to send off to a customer." So, no, whatever. They wanted to give me like $10 or something. I said, "Forget it." So I went off. I was going to teach or something. So this past summer, I don't know if this is the entrance to the Holland Tunnel that I take when I work in New York. I'm driving. You see this Verizon thing? I'm approaching. This past number of months ago. As I get closer, like here, this is the sign here. I noticed that this thing sort of looks like me, and I get real close, and it was me. There I am. Is that the stupidest thing you ever saw in your life? That is me. I was there on their Facebook page for all years. So if you're wondering who your keynote is, at least this has become sort of a almost ridiculous calling card. So I thought you might find that funny, especially because I was an executive at AT&T, spending my entire career basically competing directly with Verizon and competing with their business. So now let's start with this picture. I think this is something that a lot of you have seen before. It's a good way to kind of intro the cybersecurity problem that we have as a globe in 2021. This is probably the greatest collection of scientists maybe ever assembled in history. These are all, this guy, it's Einstein, here's Madame Curie, and for those of you Breaking Bad fans, I'll let you find Heisenberg in there, and here's Wolfgang Pauli, and so on and so forth. These are amazing scientists and physicists here. Each of these are assembled for a conference in Europe. So, this group of physicists I would say from 1890 to 1930, a 40-year period, so for 4 decades, this group of people, I think, may have changed the world in a way that is sort of unparalleled. Like, think about the things that they invented in that 40-year period from 1890 to 1930, like electricity and all the basics of electricity and magnetism. Pretty exciting stuff. And around 1930, 2 things happened. One is we realized, oh my God, the implications of this are unbelievable. There's immense possibilities for what these guys have invented. But also in the 30s, remember, we all started to freak out and thought, well, maybe you could do some sort of a chain reaction and create a gigantic bomb. So while there was this great promise of modern physics, there was also the fear that this could be put to some malicious use. So the most famous letter ever written, this one by Einstein didn't write it, he signed it. But it was written by some others. I think Edward Teller and some others wrote this thing, got him to sign it, got it to Roosevelt, and it basically said, dude, we got a problem. We better do essentially the Manhattan Project. And this is the letter that prompted that. I believe this is maybe the most famous letter, maybe the most consequential letter perhaps ever written, because had the United States not engaged in the Manhattan Project, it's unclear what might have happened some number of years later, as World War II really reached its zenith. So 40 years followed by great promise, but also somewhat of a concern that incredible scientific invention that the productivity of those scientists could maybe have some other consequence. So let me show you another picture. This is 1968. These are computer scientists. I believe some of the greatest computer scientists ever lived. See this guy with the tie on? That's Edgar Dijkstra. This guy over here with the tie, it's Tony Hoare, basically invented operating systems. There's a number of other really, really fine computer scientists in the room from universities. My dad, I believe, was in this room. It's a conference, a NATO conference, 1968. And it's the first time anybody ever said the phrase software engineering. This is where they created the concept that building software might be an engineering concept. Now, here's what I want you to think about. 1968, I want you to add 40 years to that. That brings us to 2008, which is basically when we had the iPhone. Think about this. A bunch of these guys sitting in this dumb room, and then 40 years later, you know, from coining the term software engineering to the iPhone in 40 years, which do you think is more productive to society? Would you say it's these guys, you know, what they did from 1890 to 1930, or these guys, computer scientists, computing, what they did from 1968 to 2008? You could argue that they're similar. I mean, I personally think the latter would make Gutenberg blush. Think about every teenager now can't walk out of the room with those little devices in their hands. And we're all basically addicted. And look at what we're doing now. You know, when Compass first asked that I come and speak at their conference, I was so happy to do it. A nice group there in New England. I wanted to come. Well, we would have been in person. But the fact that we can just electronically move over and slide right into a nice event together is testament to the people in this room. So what did we say before? We said there's good and bad, right? So the good is all the stuff we're doing: computing, computer science, devices, mobility, cloud as a service. That's all the realization of we would use the word innovation in the last 40 years, where the physicists would have said invention, same thing. But the innovations in the last 40 years lead to all the things that we do, most of you for a living. But the bad part is cybersecurity. And that's how you should frame the problem. Like when people say, what is this thing? This is how I recommend you frame it. That you say, look, in physics, you had all this great innovation, and then you had electronics, and computers were built out of that, right? That's what came in the 30s and 40s. Vannevar Bush and my predecessors at Bell Labs doing that. And then 1968, 2008, cloud and all these things came out, but also cybersecurity. So what's the letter that I wrote? Well, what you thought, and by the way, warning here. When we were prepping, I said, hey, you want me to get into politics? And everybody said, yeah, go for it, because we're all like in the election coming up. I am an equal opportunity joke maker, so I'll be joking just as much about Republicans and Democrats. We're all technologists, so we're the good guys. My view of the world is people who do tech are awesome, and all the Luddites of the world. That's my worldview. So I sort of don't slice it between Republicans and Democrats. I like to slice it between Luddites and techies. But at any rate, if I happen to make a joke that might offend you, which seems likely, the jokes are just there to make it light. I'm not trying to say anything, but I wrote a letter to you know who, to Trump. Right? So how do you get a letter to Trump? You put it on social media. So I was in the 3-day, wrote a letter, and I know the folks there well. When I retired from AT&T, full disclosure, I'd been asked 3 times to be the cyber czar. I didn't want to go do it. I loved my job at AT&T. I teach, I work, I had kids in college, and I was making money. So I wasn't going to do it. But in 2016, in February, I decided after 31 years, let me retire. I'd had lots of overtures from the Democrats saying, come over and be the cyber czar, because everybody sort of in those days figured it would be the Democrats running. And by the way, had it been some Republican, you know, one of the conventional Republicans running, I would have done it too. The only reason I said Trump didn't contact me, they didn't know who I was. I didn't know who they were. Whatever, I was going to go do it. So when Hillary didn't win, I did full speed ahead with my teaching at NYU and with TAG Cyber, my consulting and research and advisory business. And thank God, because I love doing it. Now we're growing. It's great. I love being in business. But anyway, I wrote this letter to Trump. And I said, there's three things I think you should do. NIST should be the only framework the government should use, and I have a bunch of them. Put the things you want in the one framework. Make sure everybody has a cloud plan, and let's get kids get their college paid for if they agree to go into computing. You do those three things, and you have a lot of fans, including me, and they ignored my letter. And I write to them all the time. I'm a real pest, but I'm always trying to make useful suggestions. My friends always say, oh, well, what are you think you're Einstein, like writing to the president? And then my joke inevitably is that I may not be Einstein, but he isn't Roosevelt. So, I could certainly write to him. Now let's talk about the topics will be these questions that I'll ask with answers. So the question, answer. And the first one here is around botnets, which I know all you guys are familiar with. And the question is, can they take out the internet, yes or no? And let's start by looking at the canonical botnet architecture. You guys know what this is. These are all PCs that are infected. It's like your mother's PC. You walk in your mom's house and there's this humming, and you say, what is going on? And you look and the PC's all infected with malware, and what are you going to do? You're usually a family member doesn't want you mucking around with their computer because you inevitably break it. But they're all infected with malware. It's almost always Windows computers. And what's happening is the malware is stealing some component, some little slice of your outbound connectivity to go hit some target, where the target's dictated by these command and controls. And at AT&T, spent decade worrying about this. And I worry about it now being aimed at election reporting systems. So what's likely to happen is that you're going to see botnet attacks on the election reporting aggregation servers on election eve. So that you won't even be able to see a lot of the election reporting. And the way we solve that at the aggregate level, say with ISPs, is we use BGP commands to redirect the traffic through secret rooms, these scrubbers from Akamai and Verizon, and then funnel the traffic out. Wait till somebody like Trump gets a hold of that. You mean we're funneling election reporting through a secret scrubber? So I've just got on the phone with some of the conventional reporters, NBC and others, saying, look, I'm just telling you in advance, this is how DDoS scrubbing works. This is how we do it. We offline to scrubbers and then steer the traffic, usually tunnel it back to the target. So it's going to be chaos at any rate. But the question is, can these botnets take out the internet? And you've all seen the screens, lots of vendors here. I think this is a Norse screen or something. Maybe it's from Arbor. But it shows you all the chaos that can ensue. Let me see if I can show you, in a sense, what the mathematics looks like for botnets, the arithmetic that you should be able to do in your head. Now, it's really just very simple. You're harvesting botnets in aggregate. You count up the number of bots, and then you figure out how much outbound capacity they're going to do, because of a layer 3 attack, which is what I'm talking about here. Layer 3 attacks involve packets that are being pushed at a target, so you count it up. And if the outbound capacity that a particular bot is using is, say, 1 megabit per second, then let's say you're targeting a 10 gig pipe, which is there's a lot of places where 10 gig is a nice big mouth into your data center. I only need 10,000 bots at 1 meg to completely overwhelm your inbound capacity. And if you work in this area, a 10,000 member botnet, I don't know, it's like a second baseman who hits 220. It's like, that's not all that great. It's whatever, 10,000 bots. Talk to me when you get to 1 million, right? I mean, that's how most botnet researchers and people who work in ISPs, again, I ran the security program at AT&T, 10,000 is nothing. So what if you go to 100,000 at 1 meg? Well, that fills up 100 gig. Now you're starting to talk about some serious traffic, right? And 1 million at 1 meg is at a terabit per second. That's a lot, right? And 1 meg is nothing. If you've got like Verizon Fios or something, then your outbound is going to be 10 times as much. And if you're using 2 meg, I only need 500,000. If you're using a full 10 meg outbound, I only need 100,000 bots at 10 meg to reach 1 terabit per second traffic. I can completely overwhelm a target. Now look, I'm going to be honest with you. There's no solution for this. This is a completely unsolved risk. The ISPs can't handle anything more than a few concurrent attacks. Go ask them. They can't, because there's a manual component here. Most of you in the room, most of you listening here, work for companies or run companies that have some sort of DDoS protection, and what you've engaged with your ISP on is a protocol where they're going to tell you before they steer your traffic off. There's going to be a manual kind of step. They're going to call you. Hey, listen, we see a problem. You know how that slows things down significantly. And then once it goes through, you have to tune the firewalls, often manually, to figure out what the botnet is. It could be a botnet of a bunch of spoofed IPs on broadband connected computers, or it could be coming from cloud VMs, or it could be coming from, little camcorders. It could be coming from any IoT thing. To do the filtering on that requires tuning, manual tuning. There is no way, if some nation state targeted all 50 states in terms of the election reporting on election eve, that the carriers can keep up. Again, it's not a secret. I don't know why we're not dealing with that. It's kind of, I think it's malpractice on the form of most of the government agencies that are running our country, that they've not taken the time to deal with this. It's on par with being unprepared for, say, a pandemic. We're just not dealing with the problem. And it's been true for a while. This is not just, this administration. I'll give you an example. I mentioned the Cybersecurity thing. My good friend Howard Schmidt, the late Howard Schmidt, he died a few years ago, was the first Cybersecurity. And the first time the White House pulled me down and said, look, quit AT&T, come do this. I said, no, but I knew the right guy. And I remember I called Howard, and maybe others were doing it too, but I think I connected the White House with Howard. And he took the job as Cybersecurity. And after 1 year, they were going to have a big meeting party. And he said, Ed, would you come give a talk at the White House? And again, I'd sort of connect them. So I said, sure, I'll come. So I go, and I was like the keynote speaker for this big event at the White House. So when I get there, I'm giving the presentation, and in the middle of the presentation, I'm sort of noticing that the people in the front row look like sort of meet the press style folks. You know what I mean? Like, they just seem, and there's some techies that were pretty, really senior technologists in government and so on. And in those days, this was during the Obama years, you didn't know who these people were. Like, you didn't know who the Department of Education secretary was. You didn't know who the Department of Transportation secretary. The funny thing is now you do, right? But then you didn't. So I'm giving the presentation. I was talking about this, talking about denial of service. It's an unsolved problem. And so this was that long ago. It was almost 10 years ago, maybe a little less. So while I'm speaking, Obama walks in. And I went, oh, that's why I like all these people. Then I ever see me. I ever see him. So he comes over and comes to the podium. I had to step back. I should kind of sit down. I'm sitting on this chair. And he gets up to say some nice things about Howard and give the presentation about some. It was actually, he looked like he'd been listening. He picked up on the DDoS thing. He was talking. And I'm sitting thinking to myself, you know what, man? I got to have some proof, because I'm going to get home. My wife's going to say, hey, how was the meeting? Oh, I said, Metroliner was a little slow, a little indigestion at breakfast. Got interrupted while I'm speaking by Obama. And she'd go, what? So I thought, all right, I have to be able to prove this. So while he's up there, I had my jacket on, and I realized I had my iPhone in my pocket. So with all the Secret Service around, I'm sure they all grabbed their guns. I reach into my pocket, I pull my iPhone out, and I click the picture, and there he is. There's Obama's butt here. See, this is Vince Cerf sitting right under the thing here. And like I said, these are all pretty good senior government folks. There's only about 40, 50 people in the room here. And like Jankowski from the FCC was there. It was those types of people. But at any rate, the reason I bring it up is this is an unsolved problem. And anybody who tells you that we can stop DDoS attacks doesn't know what they're talking about. We can't. In 2012, the Iranians did like an intensity attack on the banking websites that I would say was a 2 out of 10 in terms of intensity. Plus, they Babe Ruth the whole thing. They said, all right, we're going to start on Tuesday around 10. We're going to quit at 3. We're going to do it Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we're going to give you the week, Monday and Friday to regroup. And they were writing letters like in this weird, crackly, fake English, like, "Dear Mr. Sir and Madam, we too respect of you as cybersecurity professionals to coach of the soccer at night. We give you the evening off," like crazy, crazy crap like that. And they did it. It was just those 3 days, and we could barely even keep up with that. So they Babe Ruth it. They're going after just a few websites, and we could barely keep up. So look, I'm just telling you folks, this is a risk. You should be writing to your legislators, and the people who run our country should understand cybersecurity better than they do. All of you on this call should be the ones who are making the decisions, because I'm telling you, our legislators don't. On both sides of the aisle, this is not Democrat, Republican. I don't care who you're talking to. They don't know what the hell this is all about. And then what'll happen is big cyber problem happens, and then all of a sudden there's hearings and a bunch of dumb questions. You know, I'm an example of somebody be on the other end of the microphone. You know, NYU professor Ed Amoroso says, and being asked some stupid question from a legislator who really doesn't understand the problem, which kind of leads me to this question. So as long as we're talking nation, what countries are the best? And now, first thing I'll tell you is that it's almost a malformed question, because there is an asymmetry in cybersecurity that is almost unprecedented in critical infrastructure protection. Here's the asymmetry in a sense. First off, you should recognize that cybersecurity is offense and defense. We all know that. But an example would be that when we run things like a hackathon, like at NYU, we'll bring reporters in, and the reporters will take into a room, and we'll tell the reporters as they come in, we'll bring them into the room. They'll come and see sort of the offensive team, and the offensive team will be like 40 or 50 students wearing purple t-shirts, and we take them around and show them all the different things that are going on. And it's kind of exciting. The kids get to, be on the newspaper and everything. And then that's the defense. I'm sorry, the defense is people protecting infrastructure. Then they'll say, okay, let's go to the offensive room. We'll walk down the hall, and it's like Kevin sitting there. There's like one kid there. That is the asymmetry we're talking about. It is spectacularly easy to produce havoc with a small amount of people, team power, and it's extremely difficult to do it and to play defense. Defense is hard, offense is easy. So when you say country, it's almost dumb, because if you have 5 really smart people in Elbonia, that's the Dilbert country, then suddenly Elbonia has a great cyber capability. But that said, if we do want to collect up aggregate stuff, I want you to do a little self-test now. There are 5 countries on record meaning on TV and print and publications, on the John Oliver show, like on record is saying they can break into anything, anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance, including into each other. 5 countries. They say, I don't care who it is, I don't care what they do, we can always break in. Who do you think those 5 countries are? So I could almost have a little card in my hand here. Let's see, is the mic better now? It says mic is swinging and clicking a lot. Is it okay now? Yeah, okay. But at any rate, the 5 countries. The first is US. We are on record as saying we can break into anything, anytime, any place. The second is Russia. And the third is China. So everybody gets those. Usually people get Israel, as the Israelis have said they can and they can, but almost nobody gets the 5th country. Does anybody know? In chat, does anybody want to tell me who the 5th country is? So US, China, Russia, Israel, who's 5? Nobody care to venture a guess? It's the UK. Everybody forgets them. It's like James Bond was like in the UK. I mean, it was pretty good. So what I did was, this is me. I just made this. This is like my Gartner magic quadrant. So US, Russia, China, UK, Israel, they break into anything. And then all these other countries. But the point is that if you decided you wanted to do IT security for a living, and you come on and you're doing IT security, all of a sudden you find out that you're a nation state military actor. Who would have guessed? Like, who was thinking that we were going to all be doing nation state stuff? I never expected to be doing nation state. That's not what I thought I was going to be doing when I started doing cybersecurity. So let's go on to something a little less controversial. Why couldn't the Russians find Hillary Clinton's email? So let me see if I can tell you. Again, I told you, equal opportunity kind of abuser here. Now, let me say the first thing. The Clinton campaign 4 years ago had no clue how to do cybersecurity, as you figured out, right? I mean, John Podesta probably should be on the cover of every do not do this in your security awareness program. But the Clintons actually did something right, I think, by accident. And let me see if I can explain what I'm talking about here. I hope you guys laugh at this, because it's not intended to be political. It's intended to be funny but informative. Now, I think you all know deperimeterization is the way we work now. So if you got a bunch of, let's say the blue things here are servers and the red things are like administrative control nodes. A typical network will look like this, like a big bank. This is what Citigroup would look like. They'd have servers, or nodes in different places, and then they'd have control hubs in different places. And they wrap a perimeter, meaning this thing down here in Australia has full trust with this thing up here in Toronto. There's a trust relationship. They're inside the perimeter. That's what a perimeter LAN means. And we've all learned, everyone knows, that attack surface is too hard to keep track of. So the perimeter is not going to be the right way to protect this. And we've all moved to microsegmentation in virtual infrastructure. It can be your own virtual data center if you're a big, capable company like Bank of America or something. But for all the rest of you, you're going to do it in Amazon or something, right? So you microsegment, you do zero trust access to these workloads that are scattered all over the place and separated, right? Isolated from each other. So, this global perimeter isn't secure. We know that. I could do a whole talk on this. I don't think I have to convince you that a big perimeter is a mess. So let's say this Toronto thing, I really wanted to protect it. Well, here's what I would do. I'd microsegment it, right? That's what you do. That is the canonical solution. By moving workloads out, that's how Office 365 got popular. That's how Salesforce became your sales capability. That's how ADP and Gusto and all these others became your payroll component. They're all off, isolated from the rest of your company. There's no more east-west lateral traversal risk because they sit two-factor authentication, authenticated from you. There's no mutual trust, blah, blah, blah. So this is not something that I would consider to be all that terribly controversial. Now, that said, let's take a look at this network. I know a little bit about this network. In the 90s, I helped do some work for them. State Department has 300 and something embassies and consulates around the world. And these consulates are interesting. Like, they're run by ambassadors. It's like capital A. When you're an ambassador, oh, you're an ambassador, big deal. They don't listen to the cybersecurity people back on Foggy Bottom in Washington. They just don't want to listen. So this network is a mess. It's all over the place. I remember Barbara Bush going to one of these embassies, and I heard that the embassy suddenly lost Wi-Fi. And everybody freaked out because Barbara Bush was doing a charity, and they wanted to pop up on video from the internet a little thing she'd done, charity. So Wi-Fi went out. Is it like some weird Elbonian embassy? But suddenly this Wi-Fi network becomes available to the embassy. They go, oh my gosh, look, we found this Wi-Fi like from a deli downstairs or something. They connect to it. Barbara Bush comes. They show the big video. Everybody's happy. Suddenly that Wi-Fi network goes away and their previous stuff all works again. What do you think happened? They got so hacked, it's not funny. The Elbonian military got them. That's a real story. So the global perimeter for the State Department is a freaking joke. Everybody knows that. It's impossible to manage this properly. And as a result, the Russians and there's Ellen Nakashima from the Washington Post, but I'm sure, whatever your favorite newspaper is, would say the same thing. This is not Democrat or Republican. The State Department network has been a mess through multiple administrations. So back when, I would guess when Hillary Clinton was at the State Department, you know, she decided she was going to create this offline server that, you know, then became her approach as she moved forward. Well, here's what she did. She had a server here, and by accident, they isolated, and that's why the Russians couldn't find it. They took it off the State Department network. If they left it on the government-sanctioned network, the Russians own that. They have all that. But they couldn't find it in this dude's basement like in New Jersey, and that's the point. I give the Clintons negative infinity credit from a security perspective, because I know they didn't do it for that reason. And lots of others do it. Colin Powell did this. Like Ivanka Trump does this. In fact, I think they should be doing it. Isolating it makes it more secure. So depending on, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, as computer scientists, as IT security professionals, please encourage your clients to scatter their workloads. That's what we're supposed to do, not get everything back on this big corporate blob that nobody has a prayer of protecting. So let's talk about this one now. Can artificial intelligence catch hackers? AI. Let's start with this dude. I assume you know who that is, right? That's Isaac Newton. The reason I have his picture up is every time there's a new science, whether it be mathematics, chemistry, physics, astronomy, I don't care what it is, we all go freaking crazy with this new science. We all think, oh my God, a new science, we can create life, we can drink potions, live forever, we can do magic, we can predict the future. We all freaking lose our minds thinking we can create life. And it was true a long time ago, true today. This guy, the guy who did freaking classical Newtonian physics, plus the calculus, this is the calculus here, in between that, he was an alchemist mixing potions, trying to do magic. So it's not like anybody who thinks they can create, you know, magic is stupid. This is Newton. So he's the original alchemist, and what has to happen with science is science has to pull the nonsense out. So in mathematics, we have math. What do we pull out? We pull numerology out. Throw that out, and you're left with mathematics. Chemistry, you pull alchemy out. You're left with chemistry. Astronomy, you pull astrology out, and you're left with astronomy. You get the point? Like there's this cadence. So for computer science, what do we have? Well, we had this problem. This is John von Neumann, who also, by the way, worked on that Manhattan Project, and he died from the Manhattan Project of cancer, and he was writing this book, The Computer in the Brain, while he was dying. He was doing the Silliman lectures at Princeton. It's a beautiful book. I have a first edition of that book, and he's writing it, and he dies in the book. Like his wife has this beautiful foreword. It's very sad, very poignant book. But he's the guy who said computers and brains, there's a symbiosis there. Maybe artificial intelligence, computers, we can create humanoid things in the 50s. And if you go back and watch these old Twilight Zone or old movies, you know, the robots are all these humanoid, you know, scary things that take over and become humanoid and take over the world and stuff. And what do we have now? A bunch of people running around thinking AI is going to do that again, like a humanoid thing. Now, there's a lot of mischief we can do with artificial intelligence, but I don't think it's that. I think the mischief is more along the lines of it basically taking away our ability to reason because we've become too dependent on computing. You know, look at a youngster, can't do anything because there's Google, you know, the answer to stuff. I think that it will have some impact. This idea of humanoid stuff is silly, and I'm not a big proponent of AI in that context. I think of AI more as a really wonderful heuristic, and this is the guy who, this is Edgar Dijkstra, also one of the guys sitting in that room in 1968. I pointed him out, he had a tie on. This is him many years later, basically saying when people would ask him if computers can think, he would say, well, the question of whether computers can think is the same as asking whether submarines can swim. Like, it's just a dumb, silly question that computers compute. and that they will do as instructed. And yes, we can have societal mischief. I do believe that there's societal issues with respect to AI, but I don't think it's that there are these humanoid things that take over. They're more along the lines of what this guy said. If you know, this is easy to get because it's Knuth. These are 3 books you ought to have on your shelf, by the way. Nobody reads them, but you ought to have them. Like if you do financial securities, you need Graham and Dodd on your shelf. If you do computing, you have to have the Knuth volumes. But he basically taught us searching, sorting, and what artificial intelligence is about, it's about learning. It's about matching to patterns and then allowing the computer and the algorithms to collect up information and reason on patterns that it can put together, like this. Like, that's obviously a dog. And when you squint at it, you see kind of a dark thing here, this eye, kind of a dark thing there, kind of a nose, a little blob shape. And then I say, here, let's look at all these. Here's eye, nose, blob, eye, nose, blob, eye, nose, blob, and so on. This is a little harder. This again, eye, nose, blob, eye, nose, blob, eye. You get the idea? So you're saying these are all dogs, and the machine learning algorithm kind of figures out, it does these distance kind of matching and distance calculations where you transpose the whole thing and you look to see if the shape exists anywhere in the picture. It's like that. At NYU, we have one of our faculty members, Professor LeCun, won the Turing Award a couple of years ago for work in machine learning with some other pretty famous researchers in this area. So in computing, like for security, we say, all right, here's a password hack. Failed password, failed password, failed password, failed password, time progressed. And oh, by the way, these are all password hacks. And I can show an algorithm how to detect essentially or learn the signature of this hack. It's exactly the same thing. So is that humanoid? I don't know, but it's certainly better than having like Kevin sitting at a console pouring through syslog output looking for password hacks. That's dumb. But this is not dumb. This is a beautiful way for someone to rely on computing as a means for detecting certain types of problems. Now, one more sort of, I think, very funny political thing, and this one kind of pokes at the Democrats a little bit, but I think it's funny. So again, Clinton campaign, their fears about email security. I got a call from the Clinton campaign saying, we are concerned that the Russians are going to attack our email and steal the election. The only thing is, it was that Clinton calling me. It was the Democratic National Committee has a bunch of young people who work, and their ranks swell every 4 years. So if you go to Georgetown and you do political science, the likelihood of you joining either the Democrats or the Republicans in one of their committees is about 100%. So what happens is, you get these young people, they volunteer. In this case, they might have gone to Bob Dole, the Republicans, or Bill Clinton, the Democrats. And it was nice in those days. People kind of got along. Contrast this picture to the train wreck you saw yesterday. So what happened was, he had some people working in the DNC. One of them had a brother who was taking my class at Stevens or something like that. And they called and said, Professor Amoroso, could you come help us? We're worried about an email threat and that the bad Republicans are going to do it. And I went, what? And here's what they said. They said, we have these 2 buildings in Washington, and here's what they look like, the 2 buildings. There's this Fairchild building and the Democratic National Committee, and they were connected in those days. Look how funny this is, a 1.5 meg T1 connection. If you share a generation with me, you remember when a bunch of hippies would move in together in San Francisco just to get to a T1. Now your iPhone gives you, 3, 4, 5x that. Think what 5G does compared to an old T1 connection, but whatever, I digress. In the mid-1990s, this was a big deal. And they said, we have this little patch of grass right here between, or maybe it was right here, it was between Canal and Capitol Street. See this little patch? And I actually went and took a picture of it. Here, I did this in PowerPoint. See, it's this patch of grass right here. They said, it's big dirt patch. And they said, we're sort of calculating and assuming that the way AT&T ran the T1 from the DNC building to the Fairchild building was probably with a wire that passed through here. And I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me? Like, what? Again, I'm talking to these Georgetown kids studying political science who are told, make sure nobody can tap our email. And somebody had gotten the idea that a Republican could come take a shovel and dig down and then pull up the quote unquote cable that's the T1 and put a listener in and get in and watch all their emails. If you know anything about telecommunications, you know that that is the most preposterous view of how the network architecture works as you could ever imagine. I mean, you know what happens. This building has connectivity out through a local exchange in those days, out to a POP, out to Verizon, AT&T, and then the other building down here would have similar connectivity. There's no wire under the building. So it's my job to go down there to Washington, to go into this building, this DNC headquarters, and explain to them, you know, that this is ridiculous. But I wanted to help. So they said, come on Tuesday. So I go down on Tuesday or something, a Metroliner down. And I'm going to go meet somebody. I had the name of someone, and they told me what room to go to. So I got there, I don't know, it was like 8:30 in the morning. When's a Metroliner leave, the 5-something Metroliner, now it'd be in Acela, leaving Newark and getting to Washington would be something like 8:30 it gets in. So I must have got there before 9, certainly. So I get there, I walk in the building, and it was like one of those buildings where, you know, when you take the kids to like the dentist and you go in a professional building and there's that thing on the wall that has like the list of like suite 103 is the dentist, suite 107 is like, you know, the podiatrist, all that stuff. And then there it is, suite 111, Democratic National Committee. I kid you not. So I go, all right. So now would you knock on the door? Do you knock on the dentist's door? I don't. There's the door, I open it and the door opened. The DNC headquarters. This is in the months preceding the 1996 election. So it was probably January or February, where November was the election. I walk in, I open the door, the lights are out, nobody's around. And I'm like, what? So I turn the light on, sit down. And in those days, 96, you didn't have a mobile phone. I think I did have one because I work at AT&T. I think I had one. But you know, I just sat there and I'm waiting. I think I waited an hour. I'm pretty sure UPS came or something. And I'm just looking around, there's nobody around. So finally I get bored, as you would, and I get up and decide I'm going to walk around a little bit. And I look around, I'm looking in some offices, and what do I find? That. A router, a little cabinet with their, in those days it would have been a Cisco 2600, right? Or something like that. You probably remember that router. It was a workhorse router in those days. And here's what you do to hack it, because I know how to hack the router. You shut it off. My family always jokes, especially my wife, when she says, can you fix something? I go in and I just turn it off and turn it on. And that's how you hack the router. You turn the thing off and turn it on. But in this case, you hit Control B. You want to get a break sequence to the router. So you turn it off, turn it on, and as the lights start blinking on the console, you hit Control B pretty quickly. It stops the reboot sequence. Then you look around on the table. There's a manual that'll tell you what to do if you forgot the password for the router. So you find password reset, you know, from console. And it tells you to do these steps. See this hex word, 2142? That's hex. One of the bits in that, you're writing to some NVRAM config register. I don't know what it is, who cares? But you're changing one of the bits in that status word to tell the router to come up without asking for a password. Then you go privilege mode, and you're just doing what they say, and eventually it's going to say, what would you like the new password to be? And you type, you know, gotcha, dopey dems or something, and there you go. Yeah, you own the network. I'm standing there looking at this, and remember why I was there? They thought there was going to be a shovel where I could dig up the wire. It's like, are you kidding me? And look, this really happened. Like I've written a bunch of books. Here's one of them I did with Silicon Press. And 7 years spent a day in Washington. It's not like I'm really honestly not making this stuff up. Hard to believe that there's that sort of Luddite quality then and now. So look, here are the main messages. Number one, that at the aggregate level, at the national level, we do have some cybersecurity problems that are right now unsolved, in particular DDoS. That's number one. Number two, doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, we are underserved in the way DHS and others protect us from cyber attacks. We don't have good coverage at the national level. Part of the problem is we can't pay people enough to do it. You take somebody running, say, the CISA agency, maybe makes 150K. There's a nice salary. But that person quits CISA and goes to a bank, they've gone 20x on their salary. They'll go to 3 million. If you go be like the CISO of some big bank or something. So how do you keep that person? How do you keep that talent? That's not true like in diplomacy. Like if you work at the State Department and you're a diplomat, there's no job waiting for you where you're going to go 20x on your salary. Maybe a law firm would hire you, but probably not much more than what you make. But in cybersecurity, doing work in the government and then go into private sector is lucrative. So it's hard to keep people. So that's also an issue. And then the third is that I think you can see it's okay to have a little bit of fun with this. There's nothing wrong with having some sense of humor. I've been joking around with you guys. Again, it's a keynote, but it is serious. These problems are not things that have minor consequence. They have major consequence. So what you all do, whether you maybe have acknowledged it or not, is you do kind of protect our society, protect infrastructure. So keep doing what you do. It's not a minor thing. It's different than World War II. World War II, government was the front, military, and all of us as civilians, our grandparents, would collect up scrap metal and buy war bonds and do all sorts of things to support the war effort, where the front was the military. Now it's reversed. The government sits behind all of us on the front, running websites, running apps, protecting data, owning credentials, running networks, and the government sits back supporting us with resources and funding and guidance. And a lot of times the way they support us is they fire the CISO if you get hacked, because the government goes crazy, or they go after you if you didn't do something right or not report. You might be familiar with Joe Sullivan at Uber right now, was charged with not reporting a crime. And they want to throw him in jail for 8 years. Big debate about, should the government be dictating that? I don't know. I'm sure you have an opinion about that. But that's kind of where I'll leave it with you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I see there's a few here. How far behind the curve do you think DHS is behind other countries? Not far behind. That's the good news. I think other countries are quite terrible. There's only one country that does training and offense well, and that's Israel. Like, we should learn from the Israelis in that sense. The Israelis don't know how to protect their network any better than we do, but they definitely do a nice job training young people. I personally think that young people, and look, I have 3 kids. They don't maybe like what I'm about to say, but I think the second half of your high school senior year, like starting in January, we all know that's a dumb year. And if you're a football fan, football's done. Maybe you do it after basketball or something. But I think they should spend 1 year in service, or at least from January until September when they go to college. That should be mandatory. I think that would also help with our red-blue fighting that we have as a country. Let's put all our young people from Alabama, New York, and from Texas, and from Boston, and from Florida, and from California. Let them all work on things together for 9 months as young people. They're going to make friends, and that kid in Alabama is going to make best friends with the kid from some loft in Brooklyn, and it'll break down some of the fighting. That's the kind of thing we can learn from Israel that we don't do well. That kind of thing is that's what government's supposed to do. So when you say DHS, they don't do that. They do dumb things, not not something that I think really helps. Andrew's asking, how big do you think the gap is between government and private sector? It's big. Private sector being better. So all of you, I hope I'm not offending any of you who might be working in government, but private sector has the ability to do things a little bit more creatively, whereas my observation in government is it's super rigid. Like, for example, DHS, if I call, I have a zillion friends over there, I can't call and recommend a vendor. Yeah, there's a process that makes sure that you're not doing something untoward. You have to have, all vendors have to be the same and treated the same. What? The way our industry works, you got a friend who knows a pretty good GRC tool, so or your Compass. The guys, our good friends here at, are sponsors of our session here. I'd love to recommend them to a lot of places, but you have to be careful in government. I can do it in commercial, can't do it in government. Do I think Black Hat and DEF CON shed good light? No, I think both of them celebrate offense, and offense is easy. Hacking is easy. It's not interesting anymore, and it shouldn't be something that, frankly, we're all impressed with. I'll give you an example. If you were to find out that, let's say you're eating breakfast with a bunch of your friends at a hotel, you're at a conference. They're all eating breakfast, and then Bill comes down. Bill sits down, gets coffee, and he's kind of snickering. And you're like, hey, what's up, Bill? And he goes, hey, I hacked the hotel. And you go, what? He goes, hey, listen to what I do. He goes, hey, you know those menu cards you hang on the door handles for breakfast? And we'll say, yeah. He goes, well, I'm walking down the hall, and I see a bunch of people had their orders on their doorknobs. So I moved them all around. And he's snickering at that hack. And that hack would be a problem, right? People be knocking on the wrong door at 6:30. And you would say, what are you, a jerk or something? You wouldn't laugh and say, oh, you're so clever. That's so cool. You're such a cool hacker. And my problem with DEF CON and Black Hat is that they celebrate that. Like when Charlie Miller hacked the Jeep on a live highway in St. Louis, to show that he could hijack a moving car, I wanted to vomit. Like, I'm trying to train graduate students, and these guys are hacking a car on a live highway where a mom could have a bunch of kids in a minivan, and this guy is mucking around, stopping a Jeep on a freeway. Do it on a track somewhere, but don't do it there. And what happens? He gets celebrated in Wired magazine as like the next great visionary in cyber. That is my issue with the DEF CON and Black Hat community, that they do us benefit by bringing vulnerabilities to light. I'm an academic, so I'm for that. I'm for full disclosure, dealing with the research community, responsible disclosure, 100%. But this whole business of snickering behind a hack and saying somebody's an idiot so they deserve to get hacked, that kind of ticks me off. So I think we need to have more emphasis on defense, not on offense. Way too much emphasis, especially in academia. That gets us through most of the questions here. I don't see any that we didn't do. What I'll do is I'll turn it back to the guys here. Let me go ahead and stop the share so we can see our faces again. And I'll turn it back. Jeff, anything you'd like to add here? Hopefully that was within the time allocated. I tried to stay within the window.
Yeah, nope, that was perfect, Dr. Amoroso. Thank you very much. And I'll remind everybody, if there are any other questions that anybody has, to pop them in the chat here. We do have a few moments left. We had another question come in, Dr. Amoroso. I'll read this one to you here.
Okay.
It says,
go ahead.
What are your thoughts on social engineering?
Easy to do, hard to fix, right? I mean, here's the problem. We have this agreement in computing with our users, with humans, that they're going to do some things and we're going to do some things. So for example, in your apartment or your room, there's wall outlets. Well, if you take two metal objects, one in each hand, and jam it into into an AC plug, you're going to get a hell of a zap. Now, is it okay that the electric company leaves that risk and that you could damage yourself? I think it is. If you're that stupid, then I guess you deserve it. And if you've got kids, you put those plastic things, a lot of you have kids, so you child-proof the thing. So is it totally easy to avoid that risk? That is acceptable, because for them to fix that would be way too expensive and different. But in computing, the problem is that we have way too many things that we rely on the users. Like with phishing, we say, all right, don't click on something suspicious, but you got to do your work all day long. And guess what? All day long, you're going to be getting crazy emails from all over. So let's say you work at the Social Security Administration. You're getting inquiries from all over the place with letters and attachments. How is it you're not getting clicking on a fish? That's your job. And yet we would fire somebody if they fail a phishing test. So I think the problem with social engineering is we still are relying too much unfairly, in my opinion, on human beings. We all have to eventually have some responsibility, but I think we ask humans to do too much. My mom and dad get phone calls all the time from people saying, oh, your IRS report was not right, but we've got it here in front of us. If you could just fill in a few things, we'll get it right and save you the trouble. My mother wants to do that. She has to be taught that would never happen, that there will never be something. And how do you do that? I think the only way is maybe, sadly, the actuarial tables are the way you solve that one, because most young people know that's ridiculous. Most older people don't. I don't think you can solve that problem. So it's a challenging issue. And most of the time when people get hit, there's a component of the attack that includes social.
Sure. Great answer. We have a couple more that came in here. This is a great question. What will be the big challenge of cybersecurity for next year in 2021?
It's going to be infrastructure attacks. I think that we're at the point now where nation state adversaries see that we are divided, that we have a very poorly functioning cybersecurity infrastructure from a defensive perspective. We can hack anybody. Like the US can definitely break into whatever, but we can't protect our own, we can't protect our lunch here so much as protect agencies. So I've been predicting for a while that we're going to see much bigger and more cascading threats. And the fact that there's no cyber czar freaks me out. I can't believe that we don't have somebody coordinating the activities between different agencies. That just, to me, is spectacular neglect. So I think it's inevitable. I mean, you watch Bill Gates get up in front of a TED audience a few years ago and say, look, pandemic is going to happen. There's no question, because we don't have controls to stop it. I am telling you now that large consequential cyber attacks at infrastructure, it's not whether it'll happen, it's just when and how intense. Because I could take 5 or 6 of my grad students from NYU, go get some funding of, let's say, $500,000, work for a few months, maybe put some plants in different places, and I could take out anything you want. I know I could. I could probably take out a small country. I'm just some dopey guy with a few friends. So translate that to both irresponsible and also very responsible countries. It's inevitable, and we're taking very, very poor and very ineffective steps to coordinate a response. So I hate to end on a sad note, but that is I think if you got 10 cybersecurity experts together, all 10 of them would say some version of that sounds very plausible. There isn't a single person who would say, oh, no, I don't see how that could happen. I mean, show me that person, and I think
Sure.
they've got some other purpose for saying that, because it wouldn't be true.
Sure. Well, I'm going to give you the opportunity to end on a little bit more positive note, because one more question came in here. What do you think it would take to shift the mindset of those in positions of power within government to bring them more in line with a proper or more comprehensive cybersecurity stance?
2 things: they should buy lots of services from Compass IT Compliance, and 2, they should buy all my books.
Love it. Great answer. I like
Oh,
it.
and watch my cartoons, my Charlie Ciso cartoons online. That'll solve everything.
Beautiful. I love it. Good stuff.